Right, so this is how I made my Death Star above Catajuta effect. So basically I started by 3D tracking the scene and then creating a solid in that scene and replacing the solid with a Death Star and placing it in the sky. Then adjusted the position before trying to add a gradient to make it blend in more with the sky around it. It sort of worked, not as well as I'd have liked. It's barely noticeable. I then went into another composition to create the laser effect that the Death Star will emit. Basically, just created 6 different solids that joined at one apex, and then one laser emitting from that apex. I used the Death Star as like a template, the same image that I had in the sky, so I knew it'd line up with it no matter where I put it on the Death Star. Sorry, not no matter where. I knew it'd line up with the Death Star. I just had to do a bit of adjusting. Once I had adjusted it, added the moon, which is a photo I took with my iPhone through a telescope while I was on holidays. Um, I basically applied the same effect that I did to the Death Star by creating a solid, then replacing that solid with the moon and putting that in the sky. And then I added the lens flare effect, which was basically to avoid me having to do some form of explosion in the sky because that sounded difficult and I didn't want to do that. So the lens flare worked just as well. I couldn't track it using the 3D camera tracker, so I had to create keyframes and adjust it ever so slightly. Once I'd done that, I ran it through a few times, and voila, Death Star effect. So this is how I made my space scene. This scene was made entirely from effects. There's no images or footage that I used to create this scene. I started out by using Particle World to create my starry background. I adjusted the values to make them very spread out and the Z values to make them look far away before changing them to white, and then made the longevity last longer so that they look like stars. My next step was to add an optical flare, which I would apply a turbulent displace effect to and distort. I did this with 3 different optical flares to try and find one that I liked the most. And the one that I settled on was a greeny nebula, or greeny flare that looked like a greeny nebula when displaced. My next step was to add a camera, which I'd keyframe to zoom in to make it look like you're flying through space. Then I created a fractal noise layer, which I cut a small bit out, feathered, and then changed the colors to make it look like another secondary nebula over the distorted flare. After that, I added a few more optical flares, which would be stars. Um, I didn't really like these at the start. It took me a while to get used to them. I had to change a few things, but I found that if I put them far enough away, they looked more like stars. When they're too close, they look kind of like headlights from a car, and it doesn't look as that amazing. I proceeded to fiddle around with the masks and the displacement, keyframed and animated the nebulas to make it look like they were moving. Once I had done that, I basically just fiddled around with the camera to have a more of a smooth transition, added a few more stars into the background, and changed a few more of the color options before settling with what I had, and voila, space scene. Okay, so this is a walkthrough of my folio. So I've got the homepage here, about VR page here with some information. I've got my folio, my advertisement, my video player here. Um, got some information about VR headsets, my folio, and my 6 minute of folio footage will be in this video player here.